Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for coming on this webinar, How Imago Therapy Could Save Your Relationship in Only a Weekend. So in this webinar, I'm basically going to be talking about Imago relationship therapy, what it's about and what it teaches, and giving you some techniques that you can use, think about using with your partner, sharing with your partner. So what you will learn in this webinar, and before I go into this, please just shout if you can't hear me properly or if you're not seeing my screen, because this is the first webinar I've done, so I could be doing it wrong. So what you will learn in this webinar: how to positively change the way you think and feel about your relationship. And if you're not in a relationship at the moment, it would be about how to change the way you think and feel, maybe about relationships in general, or maybe about a past relationship. You'll also be learning about the real reason that arguments, disagreements with your partner can be a really good sign. Even though that sounds contradictory, it can be a really good sign to have conflict with your partner. You'll be learning how your partner can help you to evolve into who you're meant to be, so they can help you to grow as a person, even when it seems least likely that they would be the person to do that. And you'll learn how to have a mature and loving relationship without losing the passion. So a lot of people think that a mature relationship means that there's no passion involved, there's no lust, there's nothing left to get excited about. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. And just very briefly about me, I'm a psychotherapist working in Galway at the moment and online via Skype and email. Previously worked in London and the west of Africa. I'm also an Imago relationship counsellor, so when I work with couples, I use Imago relationship therapy. And as a sideline, I do qualitative market and social research for my own company. And I have a charity as well, it's called FSIP, and we send psychotherapists to West Africa to work in prisons. So, starting the presentation then, what are the principles of Imago relationship therapy and how can they help you? So, I think the real place to start is in childhood. So Imago relationship therapy teaches that every person leaves childhood with unmet childhood needs. I'm just going to put this actually onto the bigger screen. Okay. So Imago teaches us, and a lot of, I suppose, therapy modalities teach us that we all leave childhood with unmet needs, and that's because no caregiver can be perfect. It would be impossible to be perfect in every given moment and to really see a child as they need to be seen and understood all of the time, because our parents and our caregivers have their lives going on as well. They can't be perfect. So that means that we all end up reaching our teenage years and later adult life with a series of unmet needs. So those unmet childhood needs, they might have made us consciously really sad as children, really sad as young people. We might have been very aware of what we needed. Or it might have been that we weren't really aware of those needs at all. It was just something that we did need, but we didn't know we needed it. We just thought that the way we lived our childhood was normal. So for example, when we were really young, we might have really wanted to express ourselves and to show excitement or to be emotional and show feelings. And this wasn't really allowed in our family. Maybe the family was very traditional, feelings just weren't displayed. So we learned to be quite composed, calm, not really show feelings. And this might have served us really well, for example, at work, getting a really good job, fighting to get ahead. But it hasn't, but later on it shows that it doesn't really serve us in relationship. So the unmet childhood needs either made us consciously very sad, or we weren't aware of them at all, but they're still there. And these unmet childhood needs one day rise again in our unconscious minds. And when these needs rise again, they often trigger us into childlike reactions. So on the previous example where we became quite composed and calm and didn't really show our feelings, maybe our partner says something like, "Oh, you're so cold, you never show any emotion." And we respond by saying, "Well, so are you," or "No, I'm not cold," or something that's quite childlike because it triggers us. We know maybe there's an element of truth, or we deny it, and our reaction is quite childlike. But of course, not everything we experience in childhood is negative. So we're also carrying unconscious triggers into positive behavior. We might have had really good experiences in childhood, and we experience those things again in adulthood, and we're quite positively childlike in our reaction to them. We kind of we erupt into laughter at something that maybe somebody else doesn't find funny, just because it reminds us of something really positive from the past. So everything that we experienced with all those people involved in our care in childhood, so good and bad, all of those experiences combine somewhere inside of us to form this huge list of unconscious expectations that we have from our adult relationships. And this isn't just about romantic relationships, this is also about people that we meet in any kind of context and we have some sort of close enough relationship with, close enough to trigger us into something or to remind us of something. But it just so happens that because our partner is closer to us than anybody, they're more likely to trigger us, or at least get the blame for triggering us. So this amalgamation, this list of expectations that I'm talking about here is called our Imago. The Imago is this amalgamation of expectations that we have of what's going to happen in any close relationship. So there's positive expectations and there's negative expectations. So of course, in every relationship, there's two people. So there's two Imagos, two worlds, two lists of expectations that come together. And sometimes we see the Imago, we see this list of expectations before we see the reality of the other person who's standing in front of us. So we see something, it reminds us of something, we like it or we don't like it immediately. And the more we get to know the person, the deeper that connection might become, and the deeper the triggers become. So we're projecting all of our expectations, good and bad, onto the other person. We might see all these positive things in their face, we might see all these positive things in their behavior that somebody else, a friend or a colleague, just wouldn't notice about this person, but we're seeing lots of positive things about them because they're reminding us of some positive experience that we had in the past. And that's brilliant at first because we see all of our positive expectations coming true. So we expect it and then it happens. It really does make us feel amazing. This person really is right for us. This person really reminds me of a positive time in my life. And we might not associate that with childhood at the time. In fact, we're probably not likely to do that. But a lot of the time it does link back to either a feeling of safety, a feeling of comfort, a feeling of love, being witnessed in childhood. And it might be that our partner, the person we meet, reminds us of an unmet need that we had in childhood, so something that wasn't great for us. But the need was met for them, so we're inspired by it. So for example, it's somebody who's really successful in life, and we never had the opportunity to be successful in that way. We were never encouraged to study at school or do well at work, whereas they were. So we feel inspired when we're around them, that they did really well, they were really successful. It's almost like they're completing a part of us that was never completed before. We were unable to complete it. Maybe the ambitious side of ourselves. But all of this stops being great when the romance wears off and reality hits. So this is all kind of nice when all these positive expectations seem to be coming true. But at some point, for some reason, it kind of wears off and we start to see the reality of the other person. So just before I go on, I'm just going to check there's no messages, nobody who can't hear me. Okay, I can't see any, so I'm assuming it's fine. So to explain further, that feeling of falling in love when you first meet somebody and you go through all those first dates, all that time together, it all feels amazing. It's like you're opening your heart. Everything feels maybe a bit wild, passionate, sexual, romantic. There's nothing in this world like the feeling of falling in love. And here is a clip, from Bridget Jones, if I can get to it, just to highlight how she felt when she met Mr. Darcy, when they got together, just to highlight that feeling of romantic love.
It's been 6 wonderful weeks, 4 fabulous days and 7 precious hours. And to make it absolutely clear, 1 flawless boyfriend.
Bridget, what on earth are you doing?
Getting dressed.
Why are you dancing around in that tent?
I don't want you to see any of my wobbly bits.
I happen to have a very high regard for your wobbly bits.
Really?
Hello?
It's me. I just had a rather graphic flashback. You do have a genuinely gorgeous bottom.
Thank you. I'm actually with the Mexican ambassador and the head of Amnesty International and the Undersecretary for Trade and Industry, and you're on speakerphone.
Oh, right. The question is...
Okay, so that's what I think is a brilliant example of falling in love, that amazing feeling that it gives you right at the beginning of the relationship. And sometimes that might last for several years, sometimes it doesn't last quite that long. So that feeling, it does something incredible. Falling in love does something really incredible to our brains. It's not just that we feel it in our hearts, it's chemically, it's actually proven to have an effect on our brains. It releases all sorts of things, adrenaline and all sorts of other things I can't pronounce. And these chemicals make the heart race, they make the palms sweat. The chemical dopamine, it makes us feel euphoric. The serotonin in our brain is lowered, which actually, when we talk about lowering serotonin, scientists have actually attributed that to a tendency that we can have to single-mindedly focus on one thing, almost like when somebody becomes an obsession to you. So that feeling of being obsessed with somebody for a time, that's actually, there's something going on in our brains when that happens. Have you ever, and I suppose most people have heard others describe a love interest as an addiction or as a drug. And there's certain relationships where that is just constant, with what are often termed toxic relationships. And I think that's often because the two people are seeking this feeling constantly. They're always looking to feel this euphoric sense. So the relationship never actually slows down and becomes really intimate. There's never any true intimacy. There's maybe a fear of being too close. So there's this constant drama that happens that's provoked by both partners in order to keep feeling again and again this kind of short-lived euphoria, except that every time they come out of this, the come down is stronger, it's more heavy, and that's why it becomes so damaging. So on the positive side, it does something amazing to our brains. We feel fantastic. All these chemicals are released inside. We feel like we're floating, like we're walking on air. And sometimes we feel like, is this the bit? Is this the person that's going to complete me? So are they really other? Are they really separate to me? Or are we just one? We're just so united. We're just like one person. And that's an amazing feeling as well. We feel like we finally understood. We finally found that lost part of ourselves. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, but nature didn't intend for that feeling to last forever. Because if it did, if that intense high was constant, we'd all be permanently exhausted. Our bodies couldn't take it. What happens in our brains and our hearts and our bodies, it's impossible to survive on that bigger high for so long. But there is a reason that we go through that initial phase of intense attraction. It's supposed to happen. We're supposed to get together with that person who causes that sense in us, that sense of falling in love. So those intense, almost mystical feelings, they're often a sign that we found the right person. We're drawn in by that person. There's something to teach us. So there's a reason that feeling happens. It's not for nothing. And they've got something really interesting to teach us about ourselves. So even if at some point in the relationship it feels like you're starting to move in different directions, you may actually find that you're both on the same journey after all, and it's a journey to personal growth. Because you were so pulled to one another in the beginning that meant something. There was something to learn from that. You can both grow together, you can both learn something from one another. And that's why you met, to be challenged to grow beyond your limitations. So this part here, where you both feel that you're going in different opposite directions, it's actually the challenge. It's the part of the challenge where you're being asked to grow beyond your limitations. It's like you're both going around a roundabout, a different way, only to meet together at the other side and to carry on in the same direction. And what you're challenged to do is to become the person you were always meant to be, before the person you were born to be, before all these things happened to you that put blocks in your way, that put obstacles in your way. So to summarize the Imago relationship cycle, when we meet our Imago, when we meet the person where we can do work with, the person we can really grow and evolve with, we tend to start off by being really drawn to them. They have something that we can't quite explain. Maybe other people don't see it, but we do. They mean something to us. So we start off in this kind of romantic love. And for some people that lasts decades, some people that lasts 10 minutes. But often, because that intense feeling can't carry on forever, we hit some sort of struggle. And we call that in Imago the power struggle. So it's not necessarily about power specifically, but it's about the terms of our relationship and how we feel being in that relationship. And often it's characterized by conflict, maybe betrayal, anger, arguments. Generally not nice feelings, and we both want to get out of that. When we're in it, it's not a nice place to be. So in Imago, we have to become curious. We have to make a decision to recommit to the relationship, to try to find the love together that we thought we had. And that means doing work. And in Imago, the way we do work is by using a specific structured dialogue, which can lead to immense insights. So a huge amount of insight about ourselves and about the other person through doing this very, very structured, quite rigid at first, but through going through this dialogue. And the dialogue that's taught in Imago, it's not just something you can do with your partner. You can do it with friends, with family members, with other people. I've used it with individual clients in therapy. I've used it personally with friends. I've used it working in prisons. The dialogue is really about being heard and being witnessed and learning to really, really listen and hear somebody else. So that's how you do the work in Imago, through using this dialogue and different versions of the dialogue to get to different levels of insight about yourself and about your partner. And this leads to a sort of, it's like an excitement, it's an awakening. You're starting to realize that things aren't what you were kind of cynically maybe supposing them to be. You start to become more conscious about what's really going on. So you learn about yourself, where your own triggers come from, where your own difficulties come from, but you also learn about your partner, and suddenly he or she starts to make sense, and you start to make sense. So you decide you want to stay together, you decide to leave all the blame, the shame, negativity aside, and you recommit, and that's where the work comes in. And following that work, you become more conscious, you learn things you don't know, and eventually you manage to access a type of love that's very different to what you knew before. And it's different because it's grounded in reality. So you're really seeing the other person as a unique individual and not as your projections, not as all these list of expectations that you brought in, and vice versa. So that can be a really fascinating process because you're seeing the other person in a different way, in a more whole kind of way where they make sense, and they're seeing you in all of your true colors, and they're accepting you because they understand you, because you're explaining in a different way who you really are. So it's like being witnessed really for the first time. And it doesn't just go around once, this cycle, it can go around several times. It's like the work you do on yourself. It's like somebody coming to therapy and as an individual and maybe working through some problem they had at work, and then kind of enjoying the therapeutic process maybe, or deciding there's something else they want to work on and starting to look at their existence or their spiritual path. So different things can be worked on different levels, and it's up to you and your partner to decide how deep you want to go and how far you want to go with it. And it has to be said that if you're with somebody that won't move out of this blaming and shaming and criticizing and kind of negative dynamic, and you really want to grow and you really want to change and you really want to work on your relationship, maybe that's not the right relationship for you. If the other person can't meet you where you are, you can try this and you can do work on yourself, and that will impact the relationship. But there has to be a point where the other person does the recommitment as well and becomes curious about you, and makes a decision to commit to you and to commit to themselves, to growth and to becoming who they're meant to be. And none of this is supposed to be easy. So this cycle makes it all look very easy, but it's not supposed to be easy. And you can ask any seeker the same thing, any seeker of truth the same thing. So anyone on any kind of spiritual journey will tell you that it's not about loving the world and spreading light and laughter every day, although they'd like it to be like that. If that's just not true. It's harder than that. So on any spiritual path to God or to the universal truth, just like any relationship path towards mature love, there are hurdles to go through, there's mountains to climb, there's tests to pass. It's like you have to prove to the universe that you're worthy of experiencing that kind of sensation. It's like you might have a friend or somebody that you know who goes to church every Sunday, or they go to church all the time, they're very, very, very strong faith, and then they lose their faith after somebody close to them dies in an accident, or something happens to somebody close to them. That's a challenge, that's a really big challenge for them to get past. in order to prove their faith in a way. And it's the same with a relationship. There's hurdles and there's challenges to get through. So just going back to explain a little bit more about this cycle, and just to give you an example of how this might work in practice. So it might be that you're a really independent, free-spirited individual. Let's talk about a woman who's very independent, very free-spirited, and her partner finds this really intriguing, really exciting, and he's really attracted to it in the beginning. But then after a couple of years, they get married, and this kind of free-spirited nature of hers, it carries on, and she wants to do things always. She wants to be traveling, she wants to be doing things with her friends all the time or on her own. And it starts to remind him that he kind of needs her at home more than he thought he did. And it also reminds him that he's actually quite boring because he just likes being at home. And he starts to worry that she finds him as boring as he finds himself. And while she initially sees him as a sort of very warm, comforting, homely person who makes her feel sort of safe and like she wants to be slower, she wants to be less independent, she wants to be connected. After a while, this kind of lovely, warm, cozy feeling kind of goes away, and his slower kind of nature starts to make her feel claustrophobic. And it reminds her of her childhood and how somebody was always breathing down her neck and never allowing her to go outside and explore. It reminds her of that's why she became a free spirit in the beginning, and now it's happening all over again. So the work here would be in both partners recognizing that change is inside themselves. So he needs to adapt to his tendency to find himself boring. He needs to move outwards into life and break through his fear of going outside his comfort zone and his safety zone. It might be that he was suffocated as a child just as she was, but he learned from that the world was an unsafe place and he had to stay home. Whereas she learned that she had to get outside and see the world in order to get away from this feeling of suffocation. So she needs to recognize that freedom lies within, and instead of running away from this safe, homely feeling, she can integrate that inner freedom into her life. So there's adaptations that both of them can do, and there's lots of examples I can give you, but I won't kind of go too much into that now. So anything that holds the key to our growth, that helps us to change as people, has to shine a light on our darkness. How can we change something that doesn't need changing? So anything that holds a key to our growth has to shine a light on our darkness, on our darker side. And we often try to hide that darkness because we're ashamed of it. We don't feel that we should have any darkness. And by darkness, I mean bits of ourselves that we need to change, we need to develop. We can't accept always that we're not perfect. We might try to escape it, escape that reminder that we're not perfect by trying to begin again elsewhere. So this is where maybe we have an affair, we meet somebody else. On the spiritual path example I used earlier, this might be somebody who sort of dabbles in different religions and different spiritual paths, and when they get to a difficulty, they sort of move somewhere else, try a different guru, try a different teacher. And in relationships, it's where we feel that this person doesn't appreciate us anymore, doesn't see our positive qualities, only sees our negative qualities, so we go somewhere else where we feel that, you know, we're seen like we used to be seen by the old partner, by the current partner. But in actual fact, what Imago teaches us, what all this theory is saying, is that there's no point digging for water, to use an analogy, in a million different places, because we'll never actually get to it. If we're in the desert drilling for water, We have to keep drilling and keep drilling, keep drilling, keep going down and down and down until we reach it, until we reach the ocean. If we keep starting and stopping every time it gets difficult, we'll be there forever. Not feeling great, feeling quite thirsty. But if you keep digging in the same place, eventually you reach the ocean. And after all, without darkness, how would we ever understand the light? You know, if we were all perfect and all just light and love and laughter and all those things, how would we know there's anything that's different to that? You know, going through challenges for a reason. It helps us to appreciate the place we arrive at. So when there's conflict in your relationship, you can see it as a sort of metal detector going off and buzzing really loudly, because there's gold to be found. It's a sign that you need to do a bit of digging, but there's gold to be found underneath. There's real gold within the conflict, if you choose to see it that way. So the question you might be asking yourself now is, how do I start making things better? So it's all very well and good to know all this theory, but what do I do to change things? So there's several things you can model from now onwards. And when I say model, it's just several things you can take on board for yourself, because you can't force anything on your partner or your friend or family member or colleague or whoever it is you would like to change at the same time as you change. But there's things that you can take on board and really think about. And those things are firstly curiosity. So having an attitude of curiosity. And that just means knowing that you don't actually know everything about yourself or the other person, just being constantly curious, because people change all the time according to the experiences that they have, the things that they see, the things they hear. So you'll never know everything. And it's actually very healthy to be curious, like a young child who's kind of gazing in wonder at the world. It's a healthy attitude to be curious about yourself and about others and about the world. It stops you having a sense of cynicism and kind of a jaded feeling about life. The other thing is not to make assumptions, because every person is a world unto themselves. So if we assume things about them, it's actually very insulting for that person. And it's amazing the number of couples that come to couples therapy and assume that they know everything about the other person, why they did something, how they're going to react. Sometimes I'll try to teach the Imago dialogue, and they'll kind of assume that they know what the other person's going to say. So there's no point in me saying this because I know what he's going to do and what he's going to say. So try not to have assumptions, because people change all the time. And sometimes the assumptions come from our own experiences and not the other person's. Tuning in, so this is about really listening to what the other person says, really listening and really hearing what the other person says. So just tuning in and noting within yourself, have I really heard what they just said? Can I repeat it back? You know, I thought I was listening, but was I actually just making up stories, interpreting what they said? Was I really just listening without judgment? Clear communication. So when you are communicating to the other person, be really clear about what you mean. Define expectations if you have expectations. I've set up lots of things in the past where I've kind of just assumed that everybody's on the same page, and that's not been the case, and I felt really let down before I've kind of sat back and thought about my communication and whether it was clear or not. And it hasn't always been clear. And I think people are often scared to be clear when they communicate. They sort of think it's too bolshy, too aggressive, too something, that they'll be judged maybe for it. But the other person, there's nothing a person appreciates more than receiving clear communication, so that they know where they stand. The next thing is a very important part of Imago, which is empathy as motivation. So this is where if you want to be motivated to change for somebody or to change for yourself, you often have to feel empathy. So if you really want to change for somebody else or adapt something or make a sacrifice, you have to understand why you're doing it. So you have to develop empathy. You have to put yourself in the other person's shoes. And it's much easier to develop empathy for somebody else if they're allowing themselves to be vulnerable with you, if they're being clear in their communication about themselves, if they've been clear where they're coming from, then you can develop empathy towards them. The other thing is navel gazing, which is generally used in a negative sense, but what I mean by this is self-reflection. So really exploring your own reactions, being really interested in yourself, in your childhood, in your teenage years, in your adulthood, how it all links together, why you do the things that you do. So being really interested in yourself and what you're bringing to the relationship as a result. And linked to that is being aware of the things that trigger you. You know, if you react in a certain way, if you explode sometimes because of something, and somebody else you know wouldn't have reacted in the same way, perhaps, maybe there's something there that's triggering you. And it's really good to be aware of those triggers, even if you can't stop them. You might have had a really strong trauma in childhood, and every time, I don't know, somebody slams a door or speaks to you in a certain tone of voice, it reminds you of that trauma, and it causes shakes in your body, it causes strong bodily reactions and fear. So it might take time to work through that, but as soon as you become aware of it, that's the first step towards changing it and getting in control of it. Another really important thing is to have some kind of conflict strategy, A, with your partner, but B, also if you're not in a relationship or if you can't get your partner to agree to this right now, then with yourself. So know what you do in a relationship. Are you a person who really maximizes, who shouts when you're angry, whose energy is really outward and can be quite scary? Or are you a person who kind of goes really into themselves and kind of disappears or storms off or just doesn't respond? So be really aware of what your usual conflict strategy is and how that might impact on the other person. So if you're somebody who minimizes, who really goes into themselves, goes quiet, doesn't speak, acts moody, that might feel safe for you, but for your partner, that might feel really threatening, because perhaps, you know, as a child, they were abandoned or never seen. Or maybe when their mother went quiet, it meant that there was some kind of violent reaction coming. That could mean anything for them. So it's really important to know what your conflict strategy, the impact your conflict strategy has on the other person. And then try to work out something between you that's going to provide a safe alternative when you do have an argument or you do have some kind of conflict. Okay, so we're going to take 10 minutes out and then we're going to come back together and we're going to do an Imago dialogue. Or we're going to have a day just reflecting on what happened. Or we're going to talk about it straight away. Something that feels right for both of you. Another thing that's really important is to know your love language. And I'll show you the book at the end of this presentation, The 5 Love Languages, which explains how all of us feel loved in different ways. So some of us feel loved if we receive a letter or somebody says something to us. We feel loved through words. Somebody else doesn't really care about words. They never kind of grew up believing in what people said. So they feel loved when someone does something for them. Maybe cooks them a meal or gives them a lift somewhere in the car, or cleans the house as a surprise. Whatever it is, they feel loved in that way. Somebody else might feel loved if they have if they get a gift from somebody or a surprise. Another love language is physical touch, and another is quality time. So one person feels loved because their partner spends every hour of every day with them, whereas another first person might feel claustrophobic if that happened, and they certainly wouldn't feel more loved. They prefer to receive a letter in the post. And above all, it's about putting time, dedication, and commitment into your relationship. A relationship doesn't just happen because you felt that romantic feeling and all those endorphins and all those brain chemicals when you first met. That's not enough to make a relationship survive. It's like any kind of it's like an empty box, I suppose. It's what you put into it that makes the box what it becomes. Or it's like a car that needs fuel. It's like something that needs constant attention. You have to think about what you're putting into it. So ask not what your partner can do for you, but what you can do for your relationship, or what both of you can do for your relationship. And in Imago relationship therapy specifically, we tend to use several different tools. So we teach theory, we teach about childhood beliefs and experiences, we teach typical defenses and adaptations, we teach about childhood wounds. There's 4 stages that we talk about in Imago where people are typically wounded in childhood and how that tends to appear in adult relationships. We talk about how the social self is formed, and again, how we bring that version of the social self into our adult relationships, etc. And the sorts of tools that we teach is revisioning your relationship, re-romanticizing. We do meditations, grounding exercises, visualizations, having a clear image of where you want the relationship to be. In fact, all of those 3 are about having a clear image of what you want for the relationship and being able to communicate that to your partner, not just assuming that he or she has the same vision as you do and the same ideal version of your relationship in mind. We're always aware of the criticisms, the tendency to blame and shame, and we try to stop that, so to frame things in a more positive way. And as I said before, the key tool in Imago is the dialogue, and there's different versions of that dialogue that we go through. So there's an appreciation dialogue, there's a general dialogue where you talk about anything that's important to you at that time. There's a recommitment dialogue, where you identify the things that you do to exit your relationship, to not be intimate with your partner, and you agree within the dialogue, you commit to growing beyond those behaviours. There's a dialogue where you speak to your partner as though they were one of your parents, so you do like a dialogue as the child, as yourself as a child. And there's set dialogues that you can do to change, to request a change in behaviour from your partner. And he or she then does the same with you. I'm just going to check in here to check there's no questions at this point and to check we're still recording. So, yeah, okay, looks fine, I think. Oh, we're still recording. Yeah, okay. So, it's a bit late tonight, so this might be for tomorrow night, but one task I'm going to suggest that you do is mirroring. So this is a key technique in Imago, and it always seems like it would be really easy, that all you have to do is just repeat what the other person said, and that's fine, and what's the point in doing that anyway? But if you really commit to practicing being a mirror, you'll realize that it's not as easy as it seems, and that in life we often tend to interpret what people say constantly. So when people talk to us, we're constantly applying our own stories to what they're saying, and we're constantly preparing a response. And that's how we learn conversation. That's perfectly normal. But what we're practicing here is being a mirror. So what we're practicing is holding another person in our vision and really listening and tuning into that person in order to really understand them. And while we're doing that, we put ourselves aside for the moment and we just focus on them. So the way to practice this is to ask your partner, your friend, somebody to speak about something, anything. Not something too deep and intense, and certainly not for the first one about your relationship. Just something that is on their mind maybe at the moment. Could be about their work or a world issue or a hobby they're thinking of taking up. Just ask them to speak about something and then mirror back what they've said with curiosity and empathy. So, for example, the person says something like, I'm really excited. I'm going to the rescue place tomorrow to pick up my new kitten, and it's the first time I've ever owned a pet as an adult, and I can't wait to pick it up. So if you're doing the mirroring and you really don't actually like animals at all, this isn't something that the other person should pick up on. So the way to mirror that would be, okay, so what you said is you're going to this rescue centre tomorrow, and it's the first time you've ever had a pet as an adult, and you're going to pick up this new kitten. And what you said is that you're feeling really excited about that. So you're mirroring their tone and also what they've said. So you're repeating back, but you're not doing it in a robotic way. And if they say too much all at once, just ask them to speak in short sentences and mirror back each sentence. And if there's nobody there to practice with the television. You know, if somebody's talking on the television, practice just hearing a couple of sentences or hearing a news item and just mirroring back what they said. So what the newsreader said was that at the moment something is going on in Paris with Kim Kardashian because what happened is this, and they also said that Brad Pitt's getting divorced, and whatever it is that's on the news at that particular time. So that's mirroring. Another thing you can do tonight or tomorrow is re-romanticizing. So a way to do this is to make a list of the things you can do, or perhaps make, that you know would surprise and delight your partner. So it shouldn't be that you just imagine that they might like this, maybe because you like it. It should reflect what your partner's love language is. So, you know, if they are kind of having a clean house is really important to them, but they've been really busy recently and they don't feel right when the house isn't clean. And you know that when you do things for them, they feel really loved because the way they react is so happy and so grateful. So maybe you pay to bring a cleaner in this week, or maybe you just spend a day absolutely making the house sparkling and spotless yourself, and you prepare maybe dinner for them at the end, and whatever it is that your partner, that you know your partner would love. If it's words, you could send them a poem or a letter, or take them to the theatre, whatever makes sense. And then make another list of fun activities you like to do with your partner, or a friend in brackets if you're not in a relationship at the moment, and check that they're really fun for both of you. And then instead of working out why you don't do these things anymore, that, oh yeah, we used to enjoy this, but now we never do it, oh, the kids, or this, that, work, find a way to integrate them into your life. And there's always a way to integrate fun activities. And then make 5 plans with your partner for the next 5 months. Make 5 plans to look forward to, things to look forward to for the next 5 months. And if you're unsure about how any of these things would be received by your partner, how they'd react to it, try talking to them by expressing what you're concerned about. And you could even ask them to mirror you. So this is about practicing you communicating clearly in short sentences, speaking about your concerns, not your interpretation of theirs. So it's not about saying, well, I'd really like to write you a letter, but you'll probably react like this. It's about saying, I'm trying to find a way to really surprise you this week and do something for you. But I'm worried that if it's rejected, I'm going to feel really like a 10-year-old, whatever. Because when I was 10, this thing happened. So how would it make you feel if this concern came true? And then maybe once you've finished expressing your concerns and your partner's mirrored back, you can swap around so that they can respond to your concerns, but only after you've finished speaking and they've finished mirroring what you've said. It shouldn't be like a normal conversation. This is a structured dialogue. So remember, when you talk and you're asking to be mirrored by another person, when you talk about yourself, talk from your own heart, talk about you, your concerns, your doubts, your emotions, your feelings, how that relates to things in your past. Talk about yourself. And when you listen as an empty vessel, because you're listening to somebody else's world, and that's not your world. That's not your reality. You didn't have that experience in the past that this person had. So be curious and listen as an empty vessel. So that's basically it for this webinar. This first webinar that I'm hoping has recorded and been technically successful. So what we've covered is how to positively change the way you think and feel about your relationship. We've covered the reason that conflict with your partner can be a really good sign. It's like digging for gold. It's like the metal detector going off. We've covered the way that your partner can help you to evolve into who you're meant to be by shining a light on your darkness. And we've covered how to have a mature and loving relationship without losing the passion. Because once you become curious and start being clear and grow into who you're supposed to become and understand who your partner really is, that actually creates a more passionate relationship. You can be more intimate, you can be more passionate, you can be more real with one another. So if you'd like more help with anything I've talked about today, if you'd like to know more about Imago, if you'd like to discuss anything, then there are some options. You could go in for Imago relationship therapy yourself. You could have some sessions with an experienced Imago relationship therapist. So wherever you are in the world, there tend to be people who are trained in Imago, kind of dotted all around the world. There's also Skype sessions available, and there's different languages available. You might decide to buy a book and learn more about Imago that way. So these 4 books that I've put here, Getting the Sex You Want, that's all about using Imago to shed your inhibitions and have better sex. So it's still using the dialogue, but it's using it to talk about sex specifically. Getting the Love You Want is really talking about digging deep into the theory behind Imago, teaching you more about where it comes from and who invented this dialogue and why. Imago Relationship Therapy, an introduction to theory and practice, is again going more into the theory of it, but also showing lots of examples of couples who had conflicts, had problems, and worked through them using Imago, and gives you some insight into why they had those problems, where they came from, and how they learned to work past them. And You Can Make It Happen it's not just about Imago, but it brings Imago in and talks about how knowledge of your neuroscience can help transform relationships. And it links Imago theory to studies of the brain, which have been done recently. But best of all, if you have the opportunity, I'd highly recommend attending a weekend workshop. It's a much more, it's quicker and more intense way of healing your relationship if you're feeling that it's broken or that it's breaking. And it's also a brilliant way to prevent ruptures in your relationship in the future. It gives you the tools and techniques to move forwards, and it gives you lots of time to practice them and to get them right, so that you have them if you ever need them. So spending a full weekend learning about your relationship and the two people who are in it. I'm running a weekend workshop on the 5th and 6th of November, Tuam Road in Galway. It's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. each day, with good amount of time for lunch. Lunch isn't included, but refreshments are. It's €200 per couple if you book by 15th of October, which I think is in 3 days' time. I got that right. Or it's $250 per couple thereafter. And it's, if you want to come on your own, I can partner you up with someone to do all the same dialogues, to learn all the same tools. I actually did this workshop on my own the first time I did it as well. It was absolutely brilliant. I learned so many things about my relationships. So it's €150 if you want to come on your own. And you can find more information about that and the link to booking in on my website, soulfocustherapy.com/events. So there's my website in general, my email address, jenny@soulfocustherapy.com. You might also see me on Facebook. And I'm just getting into Instagram, but there's not much on there yet. My number, 087 432 9466, if you'd like to chat about anything you've seen in this webinar. And that's all for now. So thank you for listening. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening tonight. And as I said, do let me know if you have any questions, anything you'd like to question or talk about. I'm really happy always to talk about Imago. I'm very passionate about it. I really love it. So yeah, get in touch whenever you like. Sorry, we've gone a bit over time. It's my first webinar, so I obviously need to work a bit on managing the time. Okay, so have a lovely evening and hope to hear from you if you'd like to be in touch. Take care, bye.